Good afternoon and good morning to all of our friends on the West Coast. We are thrilled you're joining us today for what is my 11th annual Star Ratings Update webinar. I'm thrilled today to be joined by two of my favorite friends and colleagues, Rebecca Yarish and Andrew Bell. What we'd like to do today is spend some time with you talking about all three of our perspectives on the 2025 star ratings. We're going to take a spin through data, we're going to take a spin through facts, and we're going to wind up with some opinions, things that jumped out at the three of us as star ratings aficionados and nerds, as we like to call ourselves oftentimes, and can't wait to take you guys on the spin with us. So with that, let's jump right in with introductions. I think most of you know who I am at this point. I feel like I'm somebody called me a star ratings fixture not long ago. I don't know how to take that other than to say I really love star ratings. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Melissa Smith. I have been in the Medicare Advantage and star ratings industry since 2008 and in stars since the demo phase in 2011. So this is definitely, I am on the seasoned end of stars. This is my 11th year doing expert star ratings consulting within Medicare Advantage. So I hope we can share some interesting tips and tricks and learnings today. We will be watching the chat as we go. So as we talk about topics and details, just know that Andrew and Rebecca and I are all three here and excited to answer questions based on what we've experienced to date. With that, Andrew, let me hand it over to you and have you do an introduction, and I'll let you pass the baton to Rebecca.
Melissa, maybe we have to switch up these orders sometimes. It's always tough following you in introductions. So, I pale in comparison, obviously. But hi, everyone. I know I see a lot of friendly faces on the call, so I'm encouraged to see some of you here today. And thanks for joining. I've been in healthcare for a little over 10 years now, but really the last 8 primarily focused in the managed care space. I've been with our firm Prospire for about 7 years now. I lead our Medicare and stars practices at our firm, kind of overseeing projects, working in strategic partnerships with Melissa. I'm really, really excited. Like Melissa said, we are all three of us self-proclaimed nerds. We love that title. We wear it as a badge of honor. So I'm excited to get into this. I'm excited to talk a little bit more in depth into, as Melissa said, some of the things that we found interesting from the star ratings and really a look ahead to what some folks should be focusing on, or what we think some folks should be focusing on. So with that, I'll pass it to Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. Rebecca Yarish. Very excited to speak with you all today. Very similar to Andrew, very passionate about Medicare stars. I've worked in the quality space for my entire career, first on the provider side for many, many years, and then making the jump over to the managed care side, focusing on Medicare stars. So I think we have a lot to get through today, Melissa. I don't want to pile on. So I think there's no time like the present to just hit the ground running.
That's awesome. So we've kind of segmented our hour today. We actually scheduled an hour and a half because a lot of times we get on webinars like this and all of you on the line have lots of questions and details. We don't have an hour and a half of content planned, but we have blocked an hour and a half. What we tried to do is segment our conversation today into 4 areas. One is sort of the headlines and stars. Obviously, this is a really unique year in stars on top of a unique year in Medicare Advantage. So we want to talk about the big picture headlines. And then we're going to take a deep dive because, again, as all three of us have said, and as a lot of you on the line also are self-professed, the details matter, the deep dive matters. And we've spent a lot of time going through the ins and outs of the data to find unintuitive stories that we think are worth telling today. So we'll do a deep dive after we deal with headlines. And then because the entire industry is changing, stars is changing, MA is changing, we are going to take a good solid look ahead at what's yet to come in the rest of 2024, what's yet to come in 2025, and even some things that if we play our little crystal ball game, we might spur some Q&A. So don't hesitate to pop questions in. We'll do our best to watch the chat. We've all got multiple screens trying to make sure we're monitoring everything. We'll try our best and we'll definitely hit questions at the end for sure. So pop them in as we go. Okay, so So I get the fun job of talking about sort of the headlines. And in some ways, the 2025 star ratings are full of headlines. And in other ways, it doesn't feel quite as much of a headline. I guess when I look at the 2025 star ratings, we see two really important things pop out. As you can see from this trend graph, we're on the third year in a row of declining ratings. While that might feel like a headline, it's not exactly a surprise because CMS has us on the hot seat. CMS has been introducing measure changes, weighting changes, program changes, Medicare Advantage changes. So we've kind of known this was coming. For a lot of folks, this feels a little bit like a storm, a STARS storm, a Medicare Advantage storm. What I'm going to propose today is that even though it might actually look fairly stormy, this is actually the calm before the storm. So if you happen to hop on today, we've got a couple hundred folks with us today. If you happen to hop on and you feel like this storm that you see in the current star ratings was a surprise, this is a good moment to sort of think about the reality of what we think, which is it's actually the calm before the bigger storm. So what happened to cause this drop in ratings? The reality is we had some pretty important new measures. This is the second year that we had transitions of care, plan all-cause readmissions as a new measure, and the follow-up after ED visit for your patients with multiple chronic conditions. This is only the second year those measures are in stars, and all of them have a drag on star ratings. This is the first year that plan all-cause readmissions as a measure increased to 3 weight as its normal outcomes characterization would cause it to be. So what did that do? It essentially created this serious trend line. We saw 40%, only 40% of our contracts at 4 stars or above. Only 7%, only 7 contracts were at 5 stars. So really a significant set of headwinds that are important for us to pay attention to. And as I would be remiss if I didn't call a headline, some of you might have seen some of the headlines of the numerous lawsuits filed by many Medicare Advantage insurers against CMS regarding program administration. We're going to talk about that a little bit in a few minutes. It's very noteworthy for us because this drop in ratings happening at the very same time we're seeing the first ever legal action by insurers against the federal government, claiming the government can't administer the program pursuant to the regulations passed, is again very, very noteworthy, and we think portends a really impactful storm as we go ahead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel the layers of the onion back in a few ways. If I peel the layers of the onion back, you can see, as it probably isn't a surprise with all of you as similar star ratings aficionados, we had far more plans decrease in their star rating than increase in their star rating. Almost 100, more than 150% of more plans decreased than increased. Again, most of you are feeling that pressure. If you're in the Medicare Advantage plan space, we know you're feeling that pressure. The pressure is real. The headwinds are real, and we don't want to sugarcoat that, nor are we here to pretend like it's an easy situation to cope with. What jumped out at us more so than the significantly greater number of decreases than increases is the number of plans that increased or decreased by more than a full star. If you look at the number of plans that decreased by at least a full star, you can see almost 40 contracts had that huge decrease. In the past, we really didn't see very many plans decrease by 1 full star or 1.5 stars. So the fact that we had 37 plans have a very significant drop, impacting both rebates and QBPs, and also 15 pick up a full star with the reverse magnitude, again, portends significant volatility in executive expectations, in provider perceptions, volatility, and frankly, money, as we have QBPs on the line, and volatility in lots of other ways as well that we'll keep talking about as we go through today. So a couple things that jump out again that are worth noting, and certainly the genesis of a lot of those lawsuits that I referred to, of the 170 plans that lost their star rating or dropped in their star rating, more than 60 went from above 4 stars to below 4 stars. That's 60, more than we've ever seen. What that does from a plan perspective is it drains perhaps as much as $5 billion with a B dollars of quality bonus payments out of our ecosphere. Now, while some folks might suggest that that's just CMS saving money, and there certainly could be an argument of that, the other reality is it really drains resources from our providers and from our beneficiaries. And again, we're going to talk a little bit about the timing of that because it's a little bit unintuitive. When we look at sort of what we should expect from a volatility perspective, it's also important to kind of keep peeling that layer of the onion back. When we look at the number of plans rated this year, we only had 521 plans rated. Now, I know the nation feels big. We've got 330 million Americans. We like to think that America is enormous, but there's only 521 individual contracts right now rated in MA. Most of us who live, eat, sleep, and breathe this, like Rebecca and Andrew and myself, we actually sort of sometimes have all the details memorized. We have the contract names memorized, the parent orgs memorized. Sometimes we'll have enrollment levels memorized and legal entities memorized. You can basically know all the fish in your fish pond. But the fish pond is growing. There are 184 more plans that were too new or too small to be rated this year. Again, think about what that means. That means as we think about volatility, performance fluctuations, we've got almost 200 more plans wanting to jump into our fish pond. We don't know if they're going to be big fish, small fish, whether they're going to be fast swimmers or slow swimmers, but we've got a significant influx of new plans coming into the market while we have low performers exiting. We're talking a little bit about exiting plans in a little while as well. So again, last little detail before we talk about sort of a couple other gut checks and I hand over the mic is the reality that while we often think about star ratings as the driver of quality bonus payments, that being the 5% of revenue that Rebecca's going to talk about in a few minutes, CMS does use star ratings increasingly more and for more intense purposes, including for use and application of the past performance criteria within the regulatory and operation side of the house. For contracts that fail to earn 3 or more stars on both the Part C and D summary ratings and overall ratings, if you don't earn over 3 stars on all 3 of those indicators for each of the last 2 years, CMS actually won't approve new contract applications or service area expansions. When we took a deep dive into the plan level performance on summary rating indicators and overall rating indicators, we can see that there are almost 75 contracts that have either failed both years of past performance and can't expand, or have failed the first year and are on their last 90 days this quarter of kind of digging out of that past performance. So important to pay good close attention to what CMS is using star ratings for above and beyond QBPs, and Rebecca's going to talk about that in just a few minutes. So let's take one spin to the past and then one spin to the future real quick. So one of the things that I always like to do, a lot of you guys who have known me for a long time will know that I love this slide and I find it hard to find a better visual than this. So if this one looks familiar, it's actually because it's been around a while. I always like to take a good look at the percent of our Medicare members that are in 4 or higher rated star rated contracts, and the percent of contracts that are rated 4 stars, as well as the skinny blue line that shows the enrollment weighted average rating. You can kind of see that we really went up during 2022 at the tail end of our combined industry maturity, star ratings maturity, and the little COVID gifts that CMS handed out during the public health emergency. Ever since we hit that 2022 plateau, you can kind of see we're dropping. What's most fascinating about this particular visual to me is that at 3.92 enrollment weighted average rating where we are this year, we are exactly where we were in 2015. I believe that's coincidental, but some folks are kind of wondering if perhaps that's CMS working black box magic. We're going to talk about whether there's any black box magic in a few minutes or not. I find it fascinating that in 2025, we're at the exact same enrollment weighted star rating as we were in 2015. We have almost the exact same number of contracts weighted 4 stars and the exact percentage of members in 4 or higher rated contracts. We've essentially regressed an entire decade. Now, some folks are already kind of putting a little bit of a doom and gloom spin on this, wondering if that's a bad sign. I actually, having been in star rating since 2011, love this, because when I reverse my memory back into the 2013, 14, 15, 16 zone, we had our best innovations happen. We had our most inspiring creativity and progressiveness. We found plans that sat with themselves and sat with stars, sat with their service area, and did the hard work necessary to create the upend of that trend graph you see in this slide. So I'm actually inspired. I know it feels a little doom and gloom, and we talk about it as the star storm, but I'm really inspired that this is going to be a moment for all of us to dig deep within our organizations, within our service areas, and do right by our members as we go forward. Now, I did say that I was going to do a quick bit of crystal balling. Again, I'm gonna mention these lawsuits because the lawsuits are worth talking about. As some of you know, most all of our national carriers have filed some legal action against CMS regarding their claims of CMS's ability to administer the star ratings program and measurements within the confines of what the measure specifications and program specifications that have been codified. Now, for some folks, those lawsuits just simply feel like organizations seeking a legal determination. I hypothesize that there may be some validity to those lawsuits, and CMS may indeed be struggling to administer accurately in a timely fashion the program as we have defined it. I'd like to point out as we think through our star ratings, Q4 push, our 2025 strategies, the reality that MedPAC, that's the Medicare Payment Advisory Commission, has actually recommended for more than 5 years now that the star ratings and quality bonus payment be replaced. We've talked about this for a couple of years, particularly we come to this webinar. Some of you guys see me at conferences. I kind of drop a little bit, sort of drop hints, and I try kind of drop some details about what MedPAC is designed as a replacement. Usually when we have this conversation, we're just sort of crystal balling a little bit. Wouldn't it be interesting if CMS retired stars and replaced it with what MedPAC has called the Value Incentive Program? This year is particularly interesting because the lawsuits could potentially be a legal basis by which CMS may begin to find themselves with no alternative but to consider replacing star ratings. So I don't want you to think that I've heard anything. I don't have any insider information. I don't know anything more than all of you know. I do know what you can see I pulled over into the bottom corner of this slide. I do know that MedPAC is on the record stating that the star ratings program can no longer provide an accurate description of the quality of care delivered across MA plans. And for those of you all who like Medicare Advantage and star ratings like we do, we feel like this is an important moment to think about this, to escalate this, and to wonder and sort of begin preparing for more change, not less, as these lawsuits take a life of their own. And as we cope with what the ramifications will be should they be adjudicated in the plan's favor. So with that, that's my first sort of glance at the headlines, a little bit of sort of crystal balling, sort of big picture headlines. What we'd like to do next is we have a lot of folks that might want some extra intel on how the star ratings program works this year. Rebecca, could you give us a spin through the program criteria, the 2025 program specifications, and catch us up on how star ratings work in the 2025 program?
Happy to, Melissa. And as Melissa said, I know we're going to spend the majority of the conversation today talking about insights, what jumped out at us, what we think we want to know for 2025. But it wouldn't be a STARS webinar without going back to basics, talking about, we know that there's many individuals on this call who have worked in Medicare and STARS for a very long time, who have worked in STARS leadership roles, or there may be many of you that are newer to STARS. So we just want to make sure that we hit the highlights today on what is the STARS program and give an overview to you all. So to give an overview and to start us off, the STARS rating program was launched in 2007 by CMS. And at the time, the program was put forward to help members assess and compare different plans on the open market. Health plans are scored on approximately 40 measures and are rated on an aggregate composite score from 1 to 5, 5 being the best rating possible. Different MA plans are eligible to receive a star rating, such as SNP plans, CCP plans, MAPD plans, etc., are all eligible to receive a star rating. The star ratings performance is released annually in early October. And as I said, plans are rated on a scale from 1 to 5, and they may be eligible to receive incentive payments based on their performance that they receive. Melissa, anything? There we go. Perfect. So what are those incentives? Health plans are eligible for quality bonus payments, which are financial incentives by CMS to MA plans based on their star rating. When plans achieve a 4 or higher star rating, they're eligible to receive these bonuses. And these bonuses are intended to reward higher performing, high quality plans and encourage improvements in services across the board. What does this mean? Whenever you receive a 4-star or higher, you're eligible to receive the quality bonus payments. Those are important because those dollars that plans receive are then reinvested back into the plan for different benefits, different services to help your members across your plan. So that 4-star spot is that sweet spot for QBP eligible. Another way that a plan can receive incentives is with rebate dollars, where that starts at approximately the 50% mark for all plans that are performing below the 3.5 star. And as you increase in your performance, you're eligible to receive a higher percentage of rebate dollars. As we discussed the rating system of 1 to 5, there are many other benefits and purposes that CMS uses the star rating program for. So just want to bring everybody's attention to the top graph where you can see there's a scale, the scale from 1 to 5, and there's 2 specific icons that we want to draw your attention to. The first is on the left, which is considered a high-performing icon. CMS releases high-performing icons on an annual basis when a health plan receives a rating of a 5 stars throughout that performance year. So that's something that you can find on CMS's website. It's released on an annual basis. On the other end of the scale, you're going to see a low performing icon. So those are indicating plans that have low performance or have underperformed below average on this performance year for stars. Drawing your attention to the bottom is going to list additional benefits to the star rating program whenever you reach a specific category within the star rating threshold. Additional benefits for plans whenever they reach the 5-star threshold is they'll be eligible for continuous enrollment on an annual basis throughout the performance year. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if a plan has underperformance for multiple years in a row, that could be a flag for CMS to potentially shut down the contract. So it's something that CMS is continuing to promote continuous improvement on a continuous basis. And then finally, I know we talked about in the beginning, those 40 measures. This is a comprehensive list of what that entire landscape looks like and how each plan is measured from a star rating perspective. There's 4 different categories that CMS looks at, from process measures to outcome to access and administrative measures, all on an annual basis whenever they measure the star ratings. One call out that I want to add for anybody that is potentially new to stars is CMS releases on an annual basis the technical specifications. So if you ever have any questions on inclusion criteria, numerator denominators, any questions where you want to dig a little bit deeper into those measures, that is going to be your sweet spot of where you want to find that, and that can be found on CMS's website.
Super important. This is such an important season, don't you think, Rebecca, of the amount of change, the pace of change, the measure changes, the retirements and the additions.
Absolutely.
Yep. So one of the things that I always like to ask myself leading into one of these sessions where we're doing sort of education and landscape updates is, of course, we're always curious, what do we see? Who attends our webinars? What kind of organizations attend? It's usually heavy Medicare Advantage plans. We usually get a lot of vendors. That's always the case, and a lot of you guys can attest that that's the role you sit in as well. What jumped out at me this year about what didn't happen as we planned this webinar that I thought would happen is I thought we would have a large number of risk-based providers or providers and value-based care contracts this year. I was fully prepared that we would see a pretty good mix of plan personnel and provider personnel. Full transparency, I think there might be like 2 of you on who are from providers. So huge shout out to you if you happen to be on from a provider organization. We're really glad to have you, and we think it's an important conversation to be had. The reason why we think it's so important to talk about providers is because, as Rebecca's been walking through the program construct, a lot of our providers have entered into risk-based contracts or value-based contracts in the last 1 to 3 years that depend upon for which their payment, the provider's payment, depends upon the plan revenues from CMS. What that means is that for our plans who have lost their 4th star, our providers in risk-based contracts will feel the financial implications of that lost star rating on a very different timeline than most of them realize. Because again, as Rebecca took a spin through the program criteria, and part of the reason why we felt that was so important to talk about today is because the criteria of the program matter. The timeline of the program is such that the services rendered in calendar year 2023 within the star ratings program drive 2026 quality bonus payments. For our risk-based providers, they will feel that impact in calendar 2026. Again, if you happen to be on from a plan and you have not got your providers sitting at your stars table with you, this is an important time to talk with them about that. Most of our providers and also our vendors who have sometimes asked for risk-based contract terms depending on star ratings, a lot of our providers can't survive without that 5% quality bonus payment. We think of it, because we're usually inside experts, we often think about that 5% on top of our benchmark or our premium. But a lot of our providers are just not accustomed to thinking that way, and they've considered risk-based contracts to be a badge of their business sophistication honor. So we've got a lot of things to be thinking about as we help our providers adapt to this new world of star ratings and the finances that Rebecca just walked us through on what matters and what happens when you drop in star ratings. One other call out I'd like to point out as it relates to our provider community, again, other than the fact that we're not really well represented here by our provider community, is that when our providers feel the impact of this star ratings cycle's quality bonus payments in 2026, that will be occurring at the same time that we are required as plans to provide all of our members with a mid-year notification of their unused supplemental benefits. What we on this call know as MA experts is that our 2026 benefits are most likely going to be upended. So for our provider community, we're looking at right now, we're at the tail end of 2024. It's really a good time to begin educating them. We can't possibly teach those risk-based providers quickly enough or enough. Exactly what you see on this slide, exactly what Rebecca just took a spin through, and how to manage risk in their population of Medicare Advantage members in a time where we're taking a dive deeper through stars alongside the risk adjustment model changes to V28. Lots for us to support our providers through. So with that, Andrew, I promised that we were going to take a deep dive and keep peeling the layers of the onion back in star ratings. You want to take us through a deep dive spin into some of the underlying data inside of the 2025 star ratings?
Yeah, I'm very excited to. Hopefully those layers don't cause us all to tear up here as we get through it all. But Melissa, you kind of alluded to this at the beginning, and I think it's important to kind of sit with it for a second. The beauty of doing a webinar like this, I think a few weeks after the public release of data, is that we've really more or less let the story be told in many ways, right? We've allowed that dust to settle in terms of some of the significant changes or significant QBP events that Melissa talked about with some of those national plans, some of the lawsuits, of course, that Melissa alluded to. But now we can really begin to hone in on deciphering what the signal is through the noise, right? It goes without saying that this was a tremendously disruptive year. On the graph on the left, you're going to see some of those relative changes from certain star levels year over year, right? How many plans were a 3 in 24? How many were a 3 in 25? Rather basic sort of graph there. One of the things immediately that jumps out to me, which is quite clear, is that 5-star level, right? We went from 38 5-star contracts down to 7. And oh, by the way, with reward factor going away next year, good luck recovering that 5-star that some of the really sort of elite plans have cherished and promoted a lot over the years, and well-deserved 5-star. But getting back to that level is going to be, I think, tremendously challenging because of the sort of technical changes, introduction of health equity index, removal of reward factor that CMS introduced. I know that Melissa talked about this again already, but I'll sort of touch on it again, right? That relative weighted enrollment average drop brought us back a decade. That is significant, right? We're essentially taking a step back in time. You're seeing a lot of drops in plans with massive enrollments. Taking kind of a look on the right, it's easy to look at this graph. I know some of the words are a little small on the bottom, but it really breaks out some interesting segments for us. And it's easy to decipher some of these as kind of a stat from the static graph, right? But in reality, what that's telling us is actually tremendously more nuanced than just saying, hey, nationals underperformed non-nationals or blues outperformed non-blues. As I said, in reality, the nuance is tremendously more significant there. And we'll get into that in a couple slides here. Wow, what a roller coaster. So again, I'm not going to anchor on this too much. I think at this point we're going to be repeating some of the information in terms of what the picture was for this star year. But let's just kind of sit with the sheer volatility, right? We had over 30% of our contracts see a half-star or greater decrease in performance. The fact too that the biggest category of plans this year was no change. 40%, almost 40% of our plans didn't see any change in their star rating. Likely due to, again, the cut point increase, just the challenge that it is to improve in stars. And Melissa's going to touch on this a little bit later, but these cut points, I know there's the lovely phrase out there, arbitrary and capricious, that I've heard people say, but they're really not. They're a reflection of all of your performances collectively across the industry. And it's important for us to kind of settle there and recognize that. All right, let's sit here for a second. I think there's a lot here to unpack. And I'm sure, Melissa, I'm going to do my best to spin through this, and I'd love to hear your opinion when I get through this. So, the national plan saw some precipitous drops in performance, resulting in some very significant quality bonus payment changes, right? And moreover, without really commenting specifically or in detail, there were some lawsuits filed, as Melissa said. And, I may play a lawyer on TV, but I'm not a lawyer. So I can't, I didn't think that my side job would be court reporter or, reviewing, texting my lawyer friends access to, court dockets and evidentiary information. But here we are in 2024 doing that. They all challenged very similar things, right? These are the call center metrics, the performance related to some of those measures. But I think the point is broader, right? I think the story is really about consolidation and these mega contracts that the nationals have produced, and really the relative risk that they've created for themselves. This is not a risk brought out by CMS or brought out by any other agency. This is almost a self-actualized risk for many of these nationals, right? Years ago, nationals started taking advantage of these consolidation opportunities, well within their right to do so. And they've grown these H contracts, some of them, to well over 1 million, 2 million lives. These contracts have dozens and dozens of PBPs. Full transparency, I haven't memorized all the PBP or segment numbers, so no one challenge me on that. But these contracts also span several states, right? And I can't really comment specifically on the intent of the nationals, but what this indicates to me here is really an attempt at maximizing that quality bonus payment and leveraging kind of a stable population and performance at scale, really to get that desired massive quality bonus payment. Now, every decision comes with both up and downside risk, right? I think it's, really here, these national plans putting all of their eggs into one basket. The massive contracts with one small misstep put themselves at risk of hundreds of millions of dollars in QBPs. And maybe not apropos, but I'll use the analogy of too big to fail, right, from our banking crisis. And if there's one lesson of the post-2008 banking crisis, perhaps these plans will just double down and say, hey, let's just keep going bigger. Let's just make them bigger and, roll the dice again. Or, perhaps the lesson for nationals is deconsolidation. Again, I know Melissa's going to talk a little bit about some of the headwinds in the DSNP deconsolidations that are coming down, but maybe nationals say, hey, look, it's not worth the risk. The juice isn't worth the squeeze on one contract, on one measure, on one numerator for us to risk hundreds of millions of dollars. Or perhaps CMS steps in some way and forcibly pushes deconsolidation even beyond sort of the DSNP carve-outs in some states that are already going down that way. That's sort of my take on this slide and sort of the state of the state. Melissa, I would be curious, anything that you kind of see or want to comment on here?
Andrew, it would be very hard to top that. I think what you've just summarized about the business climate around the nationals and how different the business climate is compared to our Blues friends, our regional plan friends, and our local plan friends can't be overstated. One of the most common questions that we get asked as industry consultants is, what are the nationals doing that we should replicate or we should aspire to? I think what Andrew's just described is why our answer is nationals need to aspire to being similar to one another and others need to aspire to being different. It's very hard to think that the things that work for a multi-million member plan are going to work for a plan with couple thousand members or 10,000 members or even 100,000 members. And I think what we see in this performance data this year really bears out that even they've got some identity in the largest of large plans that they're coping with as well. So Andrew, I love the way you phrased, let's sit with this for a few minutes. I feel like that's been our answer all year, is we need to sit with ourselves, sit with our contract, sit with our service area and unpackage our performance without looking too closely at that of others. It's kind of like taking a test. For any of you guys who have kids, you imagine coaching your kids on how to take a test and you're telling them not to peek around the corner to see what their neighbor's paper says. This is a good time to not peek around the corner and look at any neighbor's paper because everybody's rechecking their own math. I'll point out two things that jumped out at me that are worth paying attention to. Like Andrew said, I think most of us in the Medicare Advantage and Star Ratings business side of the house have called more lawyer friends than we ever expected to this year. I know I've read more lawsuits than I've read in most recent years. If you happen to be looking for an educational opportunity on Medicare, the Elevance lawsuit filed against CMS based on the foreign language TTY measure, that contains the best primer on Medicare Advantage plan operations that I may have ever read. So that one is actually worth grabbing because it's such an educational opportunity in the front of the lawsuit that's worth sharing with your colleagues if you've got folks that are still learning how MA works. As I opened up this talk, and the reason why I put the conversation about the MedPAC proposed replacement for stars out in the ecosphere, the Humana lawsuit that was just filed does have a suit being filed about the foreign language TTY measure. It also has a laundry list of additional claims that are very educational on how star ratings appeals work, how star ratings back and forth works with CMS. Again, very educational beyond just the lawsuit, and lots for us all to learn from one another as we go through this complicated terrain of tumultuousness.
Well, Melissa, before we go to this next slide, I think it's
Yep.
I want to harken back to something you said earlier
Yep.
and sort of put this out there for the audience, right? I think this is the tremendous opportunity and such a ripe opportunity for innovation. I really like the analogy about peeking at people's papers because we've sat in how many meetings where people, executive C-suites, they're asking, what are the nationals doing, as you said, or what are the competitors doing in my state? And perhaps it is an opportunity for plans to really say, well, how can we be different? Why don't we do something different from our competition and differentiate ourselves or really think outside the box? I think that perhaps people have gotten comfortable over the last couple of years with those COVID gifts, as you call them, and perhaps this is the opportunity to really spur that innovation that, frankly, the MA program was really meant to do, right?
Indeed, for sure. Okay, Andrew, I know you've got some innovative thinking on how you dissect star ratings data. I can't wait for you to share it with our friends.
Yeah, this will be fun. Hopefully, everyone follows me. So sometimes I know I said at the beginning I know quite a few of you guys on the phone here, and you've probably heard me say this. So let me indulge me on this sidebar here. But I actually started my career as a molecular biologist and biochemist. Funny enough. And one of the things that my laboratory did a lot of work in was genetic expression. And I promise you, this isn't going to be a science soliloquy, so bear with me as I get through this. But I was always really fascinated with these assays that we would do about gene expression, right? How many genes were upregulated or increased expression or decreased expression, and they essentially looked like this, right? This was the graphic that I would produce in the lab and show to physicians that I worked with and people in our lab to find interesting, cool nuggets of information. And so Rebecca and I, again being the data nerds that we are, when public data is released, we really we hop on a Teams call and we're up all night, the night of the ratings release, and we're figuring out cool, unique ways to show data. And I've always wanted to do a graphic like this, and we've done this for the last couple of years. And it's one of those, I've created something cool, but sometimes I wonder, what does it tell us? And I'd like to kind of walk you guys through here quickly, slide by slide. One of the things that I think pointed out that kind of came to us this year that maybe wasn't so clear in years past. So let me orient you quickly to this fun graphic. Along the left-hand side is overall contract rating. It's which plan is a 5-star down to which plan is a 2-star. Across the horizontal axis at the top is the domain level rating. So we're going to step through the domains here, HOS, pharmacy, HEDIS, CAPS, admin, and it's showing the domain level performance by health plan. So the numbers you're seeing in the middle section are a count of health plans. What HOS is really showing here, and granted, I think the next slide will be a better example of it, but let's sort of sit with this for a second. HOS has a very small sample size this year, obviously just the 3 measures, with more being introduced next year, the improving and maintaining measures. What this is showing is the relative performance of this domain across every health plan in the country. And so you're seeing kind of a spread of performance, again, green being the indicating a lot of health plans sitting in that space, relative performance, but most plans sitting in that 3 to 3.5 range. Melissa, can we flip to the next one? Now we're going to move to the pharmacy section. And here, because there's a bigger sample size, you're seeing sort of a more representative graph. Left to right, you have a spread of performance from 2 all the way to say 4.5 is that middle section of plans. And it also sits narrowly in the middle of the graphic where there's 3-star plans and 4-star plans. And that's kind of the bolus there. When we flip to the next slide, you're seeing CAPS, which tells a very similar story, right? Relative distribution of performance. However, it kind of shifted a little up and to the right. Let's go one more. Now we're in the HEDIS domain. Again, similar story, but what we're seeing here is a shift up and to the right. Relative performance increasing in this domain with health plans increasing their overall performance. Now let's go to the next one and kind of sit with this for a second. This is our admin domain. And here, this is really where the story, I think, sort of comes together. This is the biggest example of sort of a cluster of plans, all high performing in the domain of admin, right? These are the appeals measures, the TTY measures, choosing to leave the plan, et cetera. What this says to me, candidly, is that CMS kind of, they put out these admin measures and the health plans did their job, right? What we have here is a concentration of performance of relatively high performance within this domain, right? And as Melissa said, MedPAC and CMS has already hinted at going away from these admin measures, right? These are all super high performers. I think we can all, remind ourselves of the cut point variation between some of those TTY measures and some others within the admin domain. You're looking at a 99 being a 4-star and 100 being a 5-star. And so maybe kind of hot take, but I kind of agree with MedPAC. See, we've done our job in these admin measures. So why are we doing them? Like, why is CMS continuing to put these measures out there when the difference between plans is a 96, 97, 98, 99, 100? That's kind of the range that you have to be at if you even want a shot at high performance. So I would almost kind of, and I'll pause here, Melissa, and seek your reaction, but or Rebecca, if you have a reaction. But I'd be curious if I'm CMS, I'm sitting there looking at the display page, and I'm thinking, all right, well, what measures can I move off display and move into the actual examination for the overall rating? And why is it not time to just start, saying, look, congrats, we did our job. Health plans are high performing. Let's move on to the next set of challenges.
Yeah, I agree with you, Andrew. I mean, this is a super interesting way to think about it and look at it. Again, back to the MedPAC proposal. MedPAC has proposed that all of the measures that we see in this domain, as Andrew said, we've done our work, health plans have figured out they matter, and MedPAC has suggested that they be removed from the healthcare quality measurement program because they're much more of an indicator of business prowess for retention or for disenrollment. And move these to just compliance and operational issues. It certainly seems worth stopping and sitting with this particular slide, given that every lawsuit that's been filed related to star ratings came out of this domain, where plans were banking on one call in an enormous corporate infrastructure where one call made the difference in such material financial impact. Certainly, I feel like sitting with this does feel like a timely recommendation.
Okay, we'll keep moving here a little bit. I don't think we need to sit with this too much, but a couple points I want to touch on. If we start our eyes and our attention at the bottom half of the slide, what we're showing here is just kind of cut points, and again, cut points proving difficult. The green of the pie chart is showing that 70% of measures became harder this year as compared to star year 24, right? Across the 2, 3, 4, 5-star cut points, 70% of them became more difficult. Only 12% became easier and 18 stayed the same. Again, frankly, a reflection of the overall performance of every health plan sitting on this call and every other health plan nationally. A few things to note with some of these cut points. Guardrails have been a topic of conversation for a while now. I know we've all kind of sat with that with that fun sort of methodology as we think about, where are the caps and where are the kind of the floors of some of our measures year over year. But the caps measures, they don't apply. Guardrails don't apply here. These use a completely different methodology for generating the cut points. They don't use clustering, and so they're not eligible for guardrails. Also, in terms of the methodology for guardrails, it's important to really remember that they don't apply to measures in their first 3 years in the ratings or ones that have had material change. The examples, of course, being blood pressure, the TOC, transition of care measures, plan all cause, and FMC. These were not impacted by the guardrails in 2025. The other last 2 points. Again, I kind of said this, but it's important, I think, to call out kind of a number here. In terms of guardrail movement, out of the 168 cut points, a total of 32 of those cut points went all the way to the ceiling or all the way to the floor in terms of movement. Therefore saying that they probably could have shifted even more if those guardrails, weren't there to protect that sort of wild swing in cut points that we used to see. Lastly, fairly sort of, simple take, but, from a global perspective, the movement really was mostly centered in those 2 and 3 star levels, which again is pretty in line with historical comparisons in terms of the cut point swings.
So Andrew, you know that I think cut point is a 4-letter word. Everybody kind of knows that, like, I really do believe cut points are a 4-letter word, and I can't believe here we are in, I think, the 13th or 14th year of stars, and we're having to spend so many times saying that word. It's like fingernails on a chalkboard to my ears to hear the word cut point. Some of you guys probably have spent more time thinking about cut points this year than you ever imagined. We felt like going into this conversation, we would be remiss if we didn't spend an appropriate amount of time thinking about cut points, because this is the first time ever that CMS had to reissue star ratings mid-year en masse because of a misapplication of cut point methodology. The terms capricious and arbitrary are 2 words I can't believe I've even put in this deck, but I felt again compelled that we saw the summer lawsuits arguing that CMS is using arbitrary, capricious methodologies that are of their own making to set cut points. And we feel like, as we on the phone and in the room today, as we all go back to our organizations and teach the rest of our colleagues about cut points and how cut points are determined, we felt like it's important to keep talking about some other elements of cut points as well. So Andrew hit on the big one, which is cut points are increasing because your performance is increasing. And when we look at the actual national average on the 35 most easily compared measures, national performance increased on 26 of them. What we think is that story gets lost. From a healthcare quality perspective, what that means is that all of you are doing exactly what CMS wants you to do. You are improving the quality of care we deliver to Medicare beneficiaries and Medicare Advantage. It does get lost in the more urgent story that ratings are going down, because the clustering methodology means that all plans can improve performance, but the cut point methods, by definition, prevent all plans from improving your ratings. What we think is probably going to happen in the next year is we're probably going to see more volatility, not less, and we're going to need to teach more of our colleagues how the cut point methodology works so that they can rise to the CMS challenge, not our challenge as STARS experts, but to the CMS challenge of really competing at the industry leading score to keep those upper end cut points driving strong star ratings. A couple things that Andrew pointed out that again, we think are important to demonstrate. When you look at the individual measure level, we do see situations where the guardrails blocked the full implementation of the Tukey outlier deletion model of statistical calculations earlier in the year from being fully recognized. We have some measures, we pulled blood sugar control as a sample. We have some measures, whereas Andrew said, we're gonna have cut points capped at the max increase or decrease at 5%, which is going to sometimes help us and other times hurt us. But we've got a couple of years where we're on the measures where Tukey had a big phase-in impact. We're gonna have a couple of years for that to be recognized. And again, there's a lot of nuance and detail for a lot of our less nerdy stars friends than they may prefer to learn. But we've got a lot of teaching to do as we teach folks that cut points are not subjectively determined by CMS. They can always be recomputed, and they can be recomputed with good precision.
Melissa, can I add something here?
Please
Something you
do,
said
absolutely.
something you said kind of sparked something for me. I know I'll give credit where credit's due. I heard our friend Anna Hanshoe say this, but I think that the sort of common understanding of guardrails is that they could potentially hurt plans in some way, or sorry, help plans in some ways because they're limiting that upward movement. But in reality, as you said, they also could prevent downward movement. And so if you can foresee a situation where a measure nationally goes down dramatically, having that downward cap at the cut point level could potentially have some significant impacts to health plans because the cut point's not able to catch up with where the industry went. And I think that's something that's often lost is that we're always focusing on the upward trend, but as I kind of alluded to earlier, there's always up and downside risk. And that downside sort of slide of the measure is not always heard in the conversation from what I'm hearing.
That's exactly right. And again, we added some extra commentary around guardrails in this conversation because CMS has put forth in a proposed rule a provision to remove guardrails from cut points. As Andrew said, in some cases, if we did not have guardrails, we would earn higher ratings. In other cases, without guardrails, we would earn lower ratings. So we share that because as we imagine, there's only 40 quality measures right now. As we work on projecting, as we work on predicting, as we work on goal setting, there's always a tendency to just plop all the cut points into a piece of paper and look for basic trends. But the fact that we've got that proposal hanging out there to remove guardrails means we've got to start working scenarios of our goals. What would we do if CMS removed guardrails? How might it look if the guardrails weren't there, either positive or negative? There's a lot of what one of my investor friends calls it's an analytics bonanza. So if you're not having an analytics bonanza around cut points and goal setting, you can call our friend Rebecca. She's been doing an analytics bonanza all day, every day, dealing with cut points and scenario modeling and whatnot, because there is no one perfect answer, particularly if CMS winds up codifying that proposal that is still looming out there active in the regulatory space right now. If I can take that and tell two other pieces of a spin, I've got one other spin to share on cut points and then one other spin to share on industry regulatory volatility. From a cut point perspective, I mentioned earlier that we had 184 contracts that were sitting in the fish pond as too new or too small to be rated this year. Again, there's only 520 contracts rated. So we have 184 for which they will probably get their first rating in the 26 ratings, the 27 ratings, or in the out years, maybe 28, but probably 26 or 27, 184. If you look at the blue bar, you'll notice we're seeing new contracts who earn their first rating earn pretty strong ratings. The average rating for plans earning their first rating this year was almost 3.5. That's much higher than we've seen in recent years, attributable to a couple of our really progressive friends that have some folks on the line that know MA well, they know STARS well, they've purpose-built their organization and their offering for STARS success. They're launching more contracts, not less, and they're launching in ways that are setting high bars even of these new contracts. When you compare that to market exits, the average rating for the 41 plans that left MA this year was 2.9. So again, when we talk about cut point predictions and projections and volatility, we're always in our expert consulting world, we're always looking for what is the volatility of what we don't see going to do on top of what we do see. So if you happen to be looking at your projections and your models and you're using last year's cut points and no modeling, or just a base straight line of models, this is a good slide to socialize among your plan friends, because this might show them why you need to bake some assumptions into your cut point projecting for goal setting purposes, maybe not reporting purposes, but for goal setting purposes, because the volatility is going to become overwhelming in the next few years. 2024, which is the 26 ratings, is the first year that we've seen the first state require their DSNP contracts to be removed from larger contracts. In 2024, the state of California, as is often the case with our progressive friends on the line from California, the state of California says if you're in Medicare Advantage and you're operating a DSNP, in 2024, you can no longer bury that DSNP inside a larger H plan. You have to separate the state of California's DSNP members into their own H contract so that you're accountable both to CMS for star ratings and to the state of California for the Medicaid side of dual eligibility. California is just the first state. At the current time, there's about half of our states across the nation that have established a date for their own deconsolidation, which means as we go forward, it's not 184 new contracts. We're going to have more and more and more for each of the next 3 to 4 years as all DSNPs come into the market. So we've got a lot of funky dynamics that we've never seen that we believe are worth sitting with, to use an Andrew term, so that we make good cut point projections, good cut point assumptions. And we'll, for all of you who are curious, we'll be looking to our national actuary friends for the best guidance on this. They've got the best data. We're definitely going to be looking at them this fall for assistance in understanding the models. We won't be trying to do that on our own. Okay, last but not least, before we take a heavy forward look, I want to talk about one more regulatory proposal that is sitting out unadjudicated, but is important. You'll notice we have not talked much about the improvement measures. The improvement measures represent about 10% of your overall rating, 10 full percent. The improvement measures measure on an absolute basis across each measure how much have you improved, stayed the same, or declined. When you look at Part D, because there are so few measures in the Part D program, the improvement measure is worth 14% of your Part D summary rating. So a huge portion of that Part D summary rating, which drives your past performance, your low performing indicator, and many other things. We believe it's important to recognize that there is still a pending proposal proposed in a proposed rule, but not finalized, to change the hold harmless protection criteria from the current protection to determine whether you earn 4 stars or fall below 4 stars. CMS has proposed that hold harmless only be applied to determine 5-star plan ratings. Now, again, it is just proposed, it has not been finalized, but it is open and it could be passed at any time. CMS does not have to repropose it. They could simply add it to a final rule without representing it in another proposed rule. If you look at the 2 graphs on the bottom, this year's performance shows we had many plans that retained their 4-star overall rating because of the hold harmless protection. On average, the Part C improvement measure rating is only 3.5, 3.6, and the Part D improvement measure rating is only 3.2. So if CMS activates the pending proposed improvement measure hold harmless change, that 3.6 and 3.2 would be added to all plans except for the 7 that were 5 stars. And you could imagine it's going to be the driver of drops immensely around the 4.5 and 4-star bucket of plans, driving them into the 3 and 3.5 stars. So again, good food for thought. We think it's worth sharing. We think it's worth socializing, and think it's worth helping plans that don't currently realize that you can calculate your improvement measure using very easy Excel-based math. If you're not doing that, I hope you walk away from this session and know that you can calculate it. It's very easily computed. CMS provides you with your spreadsheet of numerators and denominators where the math is baked in. So if you don't have that, pop a note over to Joy at the Part C and D star ratings mailbox. She'll pop it back within a very short period of time, usually same day, so that you have a tool by which to compute this really important element of calculations. Okay, y'all, can we agree we need to take a breath on the 25 star ratings and flip our brains to 26, since there's a lot to cover?
Let's look ahead, Melissa.
Okay, let's look ahead. All right, so you guys know we love looking ahead to the future of stars, and we think one of the wisest things we can do is let ourselves sit with the past year's rating for like about a hot minute, and then look ahead, because the world doesn't stop and stars doesn't stop. You can tell by my tone of voice, I've already done all the look backs I plan to do for the year, and I'm looking ahead and not going back. That's because 2024, as you've heard me say before, 2024 ushers in an existential series of years changing star ratings. That's why when we opened up this session, we called the 25 ratings the calm before the storm. They look stormy, but 2024 and forward is going to be literally like the Weather Channel on steroids in our star ratings. We're going to have red alert, weather alerts, etc. And it's going to be, for those of us who love change, it's going to be fun. You can see we have 3 new measures added in 2024. We have 3 more added in 2025. Those 6 measures being added over a 2-year period is more measures than we've had it almost over the full last decade. I think we've only had like 7 or 8 added in the last 10 years. So you can see what CMS is doing. CMS is using us as the lever, since we provide the care for half of our Medicare beneficiaries nationally. They're expecting us to do the hard work to change healthcare quality. We do have 3 measures removed, which should help give us a little bit more focus. We do have 60% of our measures changing materially. So lots of important change for us to pay attention to. You can expect we'll be doing webinars in the next couple of months, just sort of month in, month out, dealing with the ins and outs of these changes, because it's simply too much to tackle in a single conversation. And you can see our health equity index. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Now, while we're talking about stars changes in 2024 and 2025, it's most vital to remember that on January 1st, 2025, we will bring to fruition Part D redesign. I did not coin the term redesign. That coin was termed by CMS because the significance of the Part D changes, and they are indeed significant. So on 1/1/25, our members will have $2,000 max out-of-pocket cost, which is great. They'll have no donut hole, which is great. They'll have the M3P, which is strange, but whatever. And the most important change coming out of the Part D redesign next year is the fact that most of the financial liability during the catastrophic coverage phase shifts from CMS to us as Medicare Advantage Part D plans. We point that out from a stars perspective because that has caused almost every plan in the nation to either change the formulary, coverage, copay, coinsurance tiering construct, or the Part C benefit design to pay for this, or potentially both, very dramatically. So while we think about all of the stars changes, we need to remember we're going into cap season, and all of this confusion and flux and drug change is happening simultaneous to the measure changes, the specification changes, and the plans that are on top of their desire for 4.5 and 5 stars are doing a lot of prep work for these important, impactful changes. Now, as we talk about that, as I said a second ago, my blue arrow across the bottom slide, 2024 is the first year that we in Medicare Advantage Star Ratings will be accountable for the Health Equity Index as the reward factor retires at the end of this year. The Health Equity Index has actually been the most critical topic of every single event and conversation that Rebecca and Andrew and I and all of our Medicare Advantage consulting friends have had all year long. Everywhere we go, that is the number one issue on everyone's mind. And usually it's on everyone's mind because we're worried about the Health Equity Index. I'm going to talk about that in 2 minutes, I promise. Before I talk about that, I want to tell you why CMS has added the Health Equity Index into Medicare Advantage and Star Ratings. It's because it's costly and health equity is really expensive. I actually spent a day a month or so ago doing sort of a nerdy deep dive into academic literature around health disparities, health inequities. And I have to admit, as somebody who's been in Medicare Advantage a long time, I found myself stunned into silence. When we look at racial disparities, education disparities, mental health as a clinical disparity, it's actually almost overwhelmingly financially costly for us to not be dealing with health equity. This is why CMS has implemented the Health Equity Index. They can see in their data we're not doing enough, and they can see the clinical quality of Medicare beneficiaries in our membership is definitely poorer than it could be. And if we attack health equity as a moral imperative, we're going to save money for CMS and the Medicare Trust Fund. So what does that mean? When we think about what our reality is, we've not been doing enough because it's hard work and we're busy doing other work. CMS has applied the Health Equity Index as a formula, almost a measure to compute our health equity. For us in insurance, we're accustomed to administering uniformly designed insurance that is agnostic to a person's personal characteristics. This new health equity imperative through the HEI and Medicare Stars will be a fundamental shift. It will require us to think about, is what we're doing equitable? Look at my little visual of equity and equality. Not is what we're doing equal, but is it equitable? So a couple things that we think are important. One, if we do this work well, the reason I put that last slide into this deck is because if we do this work well, we're going to drive cost savings by improving the quality of care. That's how we're going to fund this work. But the more tightly we deal with the implementation of the HEI and Medicare Advantage Stars, and we over tactify or over tightly develop the interventions to the current specifications, we're not going to get that ROI, and it's going to become a money drain. Now, as I said, CMS is putting the HEI into stars because when they look at our star ratings that you see on this slide of dual eligible SNP member plans, they can see we're not doing enough. The bars on the far right show us the Medicare Advantage enrollment weighted average star rating for each of the last 2 years. On the left, you can see the percent of SNP members in each contract. Look at how much lower our SNP populations perform than our non-SNP populations. CMS can see we've worked hard to deal with the lowest hanging fruit, the people who are most likely to go get screenings, the people who are most likely to want to care about their health, and not the ones that are most costly to our regulator and our payer, who, as I started off our slide 1, is becoming a tighter regulator and a more stringent payer. So the HEI is exactly intended to be hard. It's intended to cause us to think about what we're doing and why to harvest the right healthcare improvements. Now, iteration 1 of the HEI is going to measure quality across a subset of star measures for our dual eligible members, our LIS eligible members, and our disabled members. And again, we know folks are going to default to wanting to over tactify that, but this is a good moment to sort of, yes, deal with the realities in the short term, but think about what we're going to do as CMS continues evolving health equity accountability. This will not be the permanent criteria by which a health equity is measured long term. We're not going to do too much into the deep dive of the computation. There's lots of others who have done deep computational primers, and we appreciate them for doing that. What we want to do is connect the dots for you across a few other areas that CMS is tackling health equity. Yes, for those of us on this call, CMS has put the health equity index in. CMS has also deployed 3 additional regulatory pronouncements this year that will improve health equity accountability. In May of this year, the Office of Civil Rights actually weighed in on Medicare and Medicaid beneficiaries' entitlements to non-discriminatory healthcare coverage, including the way we run predictive algorithms, the way our vendors run predictive algorithms, the way our websites work, our mobile tools, and our content works. The Office of Civil Rights is intentionally looking to hold us more accountable to make sure we're not discriminating. We're not servicing the most independent, the most well-resourced, the least underserved communities in our pursuit of stars. So we need to be thinking about Office of Civil Rights is a pretty hefty notification to get if you get a notice of noncompliance from OCR versus HHS. This is alongside the 24 Medicaid final rule, which is implementing a 50 statewide national quality program like STARS across the Medicaid book of business by 2028, and DSNP alignment, which takes effect in 2027. So CMS has got a lot of tentacles as they are working beyond just adding an HEI into STARS. So I tell you that story because we're working hard. You'll notice Andrew and Rebecca and myself, when we're on projects or calls with you guys, you'll notice we're not over jumping to quick, simplistic, fastest possible solutions. We're trying to connect all of these dots as we're helping our clients build sustainable health equity programs that pay for themselves by reducing avoidable medical expense. A couple of you have asked us specifically for some tools today on sort of what are a couple tools if you're struggling. If you happen to be struggling with the health equity index going into a busy winter, you might want to take a peek at the Health and Human Services health equity roadmaps. So Health and Human Services has put a robust body of knowledge out in front of us, telling us exactly what we need to do. We need to go work in behavioral health and underserved populations, access and welcoming healthcare for all. It really doesn't have to be more complicated than that as we go forward. Okay, so I'm going to go forward, and Rebecca, I want to not jump over the important new measures taking effect in 2024. Maybe you could give everybody a spin on the new 2024 HOS measures and the new 25 Part D measures for a few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely, Melissa. I think, Melissa, I will say this, that you are the champion of the HOS fan club as a HOS lover of the group. I'm sure that there are many on this call that are on my side where HOS is difficult. A lot of people think HOS is difficult, but one thing that we need to remember is HOS is not going away. This came to fruition in 1998 and was introduced by Medicare, and it's not going away. CMS this year has introduced 2 new measures into HOS. These should not be surprising to you all. They've been on the display for many years to come, monitoring the improving and maintaining physical health and improving and maintaining mental health. One thing I just want to call out to this group is CMS is going to, for many of you, survey responses are scary. They're difficult. It's something that is, for us, it's not going to be stopped. And it's just that we need to anchor to patient outcomes, anchoring to patient outcomes, anchoring to visits with our providers, anchoring to the annual wellness visits, and that will anchor us back to the HOS measures. Melissa, as a champion of the HOS fan club, is there anything that you potentially want to add to?
Yes, everybody knows I'm the champion member of the Haas Lover Society. So one, if you need a little cheerleader, just call me or text me. I promise I will text back quickly. I love Haas. I love Haas because they're basically just our mission. Are we helping people be as healthy as they possibly can be? And when we do that well, we reduce medical spend. If you take a look at the Haas website, CMS has put all of the academic research online that shows exactly what the widgets of activity-based moments are that we can influence a person's responses. When we do this work, our members have lower medical spend. This is how we make margin, is by dealing with Haas. So if I happen to have any friends on that your actuaries are struggling to invest in budget you need for Haas, best tip I can say is join Andrew, Rebecca, myself, our friends Kim and Tina Derringer, who's on the line. We're going to be spending a day together sitting with Haas, a full day in New Orleans on December 2nd, where we are sitting with members in Medicare and these questions on the Haas survey that matter, so we can help all of you find good interventions that pass your business case requirements so that you can get the business moving and drive costs down. So yeah, I can't wait to find some more Haas lovers in our Haas lover societies. We go through the Haas, we're calling it the Haas Hackathon on December 2nd. I hope you'll join us.
Melissa, I don't think I've ever met anybody that loves Haas as much
I know,
as you. And you
I
will
know. I really do love it. I really
I
do
love it.
love it.
I love it. And so I think, as Melissa discussed, this is an unprecedented time that we've ever seen in stars. There are a lot of headwinds that so many of you are facing when it comes to new measures, new measure changes, changes in weighting. And some of those changes are listed on the slide regarding the polypharmacy measures that will go live in measurement year 2025. So if you need any additional information on what is being measured, what is being included, how do you think about these measures, all of those tips and tricks are included on this slide. But we would strongly encourage all of you to make sure that your plans are ready now for this, because this is going to be measured starting in 1/1/25. So if anybody has any questions on this or needs a little bit more detail, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to discuss it more.
Yeah, and if I could offer a couple things, the
Please.
bottom two rows on this slide are directly from CMS's rulemaking documents where these two measures were codified for addition to stars. These measures are in stars because they're egregiously dangerous. When a person is filling drugs at this level, their life and safety are truly at risk. What's fascinating to me is that they're being rolled out as Part D measures since they're drug related, which we know is going to cause most folks to sort of turf it over to a pharmacy department. But CMS has said they believe this to be care management work. They believe that our ability as the insurer to get immediate knowledge of the claims that are filled and get it to a care manager who can help the patient and to a provider and prescriber who can get the patient off these drugs is the magic. So if you happen to be sort of turfing this over to your poor pharmacy manager who's dealing with Part D redesign, do him a favor. This is actually a Part C problem, not a Part D problem, even though it's going to be a Part C measure. A Part D measure. So a lot of important work to be done here. A lot of important work to be done, and no less important, Andrew, than the ECDS transition, which is an even bigger deal.
Yeah, I've been obsessed with this for a while. I know you and I have spent many a time talking about this. So, and I wish I had more time. I know we're running low on time, so I'm going to do my best to quickly run through this. But if this slide resonates with anyone, reach out to one of the three of us. I think there's just so much to unpack here. But let me nerd out for a second and say that again, I love this slide. Earlier, my colleague Julie Evans and I from Prospire, she and I kind of sat with this maybe about a year ago and kind of had a version one of this slide as we were helping a client think through a specific challenge they were having related to thinking ahead towards ECDS transition. And then, Melissa and I kind of sat with this and have evolved and iterated with it over time. But look, the fact is, as the title indicates, CMS is transitioning to digital quality measurement and ECDS. We're seeing it with Colo already this upcoming hybrid season. And this isn't some theoretical thing, right? It's reality. Now, the speed at which this is going to change and the timeline is up to some debate, right? 2030 or maybe earlier, probably later. But don't fool yourselves, it's happening. And I think that as we consider kind of winners and losers in this journey, I'm of the strong opinion that the plans and the people that really invest in this now, frankly, maybe last year, but now invest in this, get ahead of it, are going to be the ones that come out up front or ahead within this journey. I think the other quick thing to point out is that sometimes it's hard to prove sort of the ROI, or this is kind of sitting in the HEDIS quality world, but this is not a HEDIS specific function. This is IT, this is analytics, this is all of the difficult things that quality is really shifting toward. And it also provides such a wide range of return on investment to other areas of the business, like the member's experience of the plan or risk adjustment and some of these other critical functions. I'll be clear again, and again, if some folks take some screen grabs here of this, I think this is a great slide, but this is like grade school level depth of knowledge. We could probably do another 40, 100-page deck that goes deep into each of these individual bullets. And I want to stress the level of work, the level of rigor that it's going to take to get through this transition, but it's going to be required. So I'll pause there. Again, I wish we could go into more there, but if anyone's curious, if anyone's not thinking about this, or if they want to kind of tease it out together, reach out to one of us and would be happy to chat more on it.
Yeah, 100%. And Andrew, I'm glad you brought up, like, we've all had to sit with this theme over and over and over again this year, which is always a tell that there's something important to be taken away from us having to sit with it. For full transparency, during about a month period of time, we had like 10 health plans reach out asking us specifically if they needed to be buying charts and running NLP on charts for HEDIS success. What we quickly concluded was yes, 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 and yes, yes, yes. So if you're not doing that, the answer is yes. The reason I tell that story is because the more frequently we realized we were having to tell that story, which ties to one of these bullets, Andrew and I realized we had all the rest of the bullets on this slide that needed similar deep dives. And each of these bullets is an element of your ECDS conversion project for which there's no one right answer. There's no table stakes. There's no best practices. This is all building from the ground up. So we kind of felt like it was helpful to share a good cheat sheet, because sometimes just knowing what the checklist is of the project, the sub projects, is a helpful way to jumpstart hard work where there's not much to go on to get started for those of us that are operators. I know we're almost at time, so 2 caveats. One, we're not going to go through all the ins and outs of the fourth quarter push, other than to say, you guys know we love to hand out checklists. We'll send this deck out later this afternoon or first thing tomorrow. We encourage you to share the questions. There's no one perfect set of answers this year as part of the Q4, Q1, Q2 cleanup and push. Every plan is different. Your Part D redesign changes are different. This is why this year we've phrased everything as questions, because we believe this is a year where asking questions and leading with questions is far more impactful than leading with solutions. And we offer that. We're going to flip to Q&A. We're going to stay on probably another 30 minutes. So anybody who wants to stay on, we'll get to your questions, and anybody who's got flexibility, we're going to hang out because we understand this is a year of risk. It's a year where you can't guarantee anything. You can't guarantee your predictability. You can't guarantee cut points. And now we believe we have to just really educate our leaders on the value of taking risks. Smart risks are important. Smart risks are what leaders and not followers do. And that's what we aspire to this winter. So with that, friends, why don't we flip over and do some Q&A and sort of see if we can maybe stay on for 30 minutes. Rebecca and Andrew, I don't know if you guys have time to stay on for another 30 minutes. I'm going to flip my screens here just a hot bit, and maybe we can flip to Q&A and keep things rolling if that works.
Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. For my friends who have to drop, thank you guys for joining us. We'll send the recording out so you can socialize it around your organization, and we appreciate all of you. Slides will come out. I should have said that at the beginning. That's always a hot question. We'll get you guys slides. We're here to help. And for those of you guys who want to stay on, we'll stay on as long as we can, and we'll answer whatever we can that we might have to answer with a healthy hot dose of I don't knows on some technical ones too. Okay. Rebecca, why don't you drive us through questions? You've got access to the chat. I see 18. You want to be our moderator? You can ping us over the questions that matter.
Yeah, happy to.
Okay.
So first question from the group is, what were the causes and decreases in star rating? What were the driving factors in the increase? And was there a change in some that may have been unaware of?
Good question. Andrew, what's your gut reaction to that question?
I mean, I think there's so many different ways you can take it, right? I mean, I think the obvious piece is obviously the cut point kind of movement. You know, we've reached the upper limit in a lot of these measures. I point to the admin measures. I point you know, to that set of measures I talked through. I think in some ways too, the utilization trends. I mean, we're kind of getting back to that kind of pre-COVID, you know, end and a lot of, you know, members who had delayed care perhaps, and health plans having to navigate through that whole piece. There were some plans that were getting ahead of benefit changes. So I know that, you know, this year is going to be a pretty significant year. You know, not to answer a different question, but, you know, this year is going to be a significant year for health plans to navigate the CAP survey, in particular for those members returning to their plan. But, you know, there were some last year that started to get ahead of that. And I think you saw that in some of the CAPS measures as well.
Yep, yep. I think when we look at the measure level data, you know, it's always hard to figure out what we can poke into slides. I mean, we're sitting here, we've been on 90 minutes and we probably could have put 50 more slides in there.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry we didn't have this in a slide. I think folks were surprised a little bit with their continued struggle on the new measures, TRC, FMC, PCR. Some of you guys might have noticed that those are still sitting. They're not a national average of 4-star. The star ratings program is doing what it's intended to do and bringing new measures in that need effort and attention. And once plan all cause readmissions got weighted a 3 this year, you can see people are getting drugged down over the increased weight of lower performing measures, which impacts the math. Improvement measures, if you flip back to that other slide when you get this deck, if you look at improvement measures, same story. Think about what we said, improvement measures, the average Part C improvement measure was 3.6. The average Part D improvement measure was 3.2. That's 10% of your overall rating. So if you're kind of looking at that 4-star as your goal, right there is about a 3.4 drag for 10% of your overall pie. Again, that's why we put it in there visually instead of with words, because sometimes we need to pop those visuals out and show folks. This is why everybody throughout the building has to be doing their day job. This is not a STARS team function. And I guess that would be sort of how I would wrap up my commentary, is that I think a lot of folks during COVID, STARS got defaulted to a star manager or a star director doing all the things for STARS. And I think folks may have gotten caught a little bit off guard that no STARS team can do enough. This is an organizational excellence program more so than a departmental activity.
And we see that all the time, right? We see there's so many talented people in stars that we work with and have the privilege of working with every day that frankly the world is on their shoulders, you know, and I think that's so excellent what you just said, because it's so evidently clear that, you know, plans kind of had that default to one person, one leader. Oh, hey, they got it. They're off to the side doing it. When in reality, stars is a reflection, to use your words, of the organizational commitment to this and to their members.
Yep, for
Um,
sure.
I'll take the next. I'll ask the next question here. I see our friend Sarah Lords asked a question, which we kind of touched on a little bit in the deck, but I think it'd be cool to tease it out a little bit. So Sarah's question was: do plans on average go out of the too new to rate stage and into a lower rating for their first year, maybe potentially swinging cut points down? Or is there no understanding on what those first years of a newly rated plan look like? So I think, again, the question being, when a plan moves from too new into the rating category, is there a general trend that we see?
Yeah, so Sarah, I'm so glad you asked that question. And that's why we popped that slide in that showed the plans that received their first rating compared to the plans that exited. You know, that has changed. The reason we put that particular slide in this deck is because the answer to your question is different now than it was 3 years ago. Right now, plans that are generally moving out of the too new to rate are doing pretty well. I think the quote was on that slide, a 3.41 is the average overall rating of new plans getting their first rating. In past years, we did see that much lower. So yeah, it's a really good question of, is there no understanding of what those look like? We believe that this 2025 set of ratings for first year plans is an anomaly Because remember, the 2026 ratings will have the California deconsolidated D-SNP plans added as their own age contracts, which is going to skew the answer to this question. So whatever our answer is today is just it's a one and done, 1 year only. It's not going to be a replay because the characteristics of plans that get split out in that first year are going to change as well. Really good question. Okay,
I have
so
another.
yeah,
Oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, are you gonna moderate for us, Andrew? You're a really good moderator too.
Well, I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to play,
Okay, good.
play game show host here. So I
Awesome.
like this other one here from our friend Tom Dahl. So I have a little crystal balling here, but so let's say for a second that MedPAC gets its way, right, and
Yeah.
star ratings become retired. Terrifying as that may sound, what would the earliest be for something like that to even happen, and how would we even think about that from a sequencing and timing perspective?
I love that question. So let's talk about the reality of what MA is right now and what STARS is right now. And the reality is that star ratings and Medicare are a political machine as much as a Wall Street machine, as much as a healthcare quality machine. So let me give a couple of caveats and then we'll answer your question, Tom. So with the recognition that right now, both parties seem rather supportive of Medicare Advantage. Neither party seems super supportive of stars, and the lawsuits definitely make CMS undoubtedly frustrated. Any change from stars or QBPs has to go through rulemaking. So it has to be proposed, it has to be public commentary, and then it has to be codified. Technically, by the letter of the here's a bill on Capitol Hill law, that could happen much faster than we would expect, except for the fact that a lot of the slides we put in here are connecting the dots. It could happen logistically quickly. I won't even say how early it is because somebody will quote me and it would be frightening. But it's a political game. So we have every one of you has Congress people, your senators, your House of representatives. All of your providers have skin in the game if they're value-based or risk-based. And we expect there to be an immense political attention given to this question before it gets ripped and replaced. But the lawsuits don't help us because the lawsuits are attached to, 16, $17 billion of spend that MedPAC has said is not a good reflection of quality. And the nationals who earn 67% of that poor spend have now said CMS can't administer. So I don't know quite exactly what to say other than we're definitely afraid that be careful what you wish for. It just might come true. These lawsuits are not easily remedied. I almost said remediated. That we should be on guard. My recommendation on speed, Tom, and to all of our friends who are still on, is to one, stay close to all of us who stay up all night as soon as new proposed rules and final rules show up. If we ever get a hint, we will know it. We will, as an industry, have plenty of time to react. And sign up on the MedPAC webpage for alerts for their meetings and their public reports. The reports are amazing and educational, hard to read, a little bit dry, but MedPAC is really a good signal on what's coming too.
Andrew, I think I'll ping pong the next one to you. The next question is regarding, what do you think about the new requirements that require plans to make contact with members to let them know they haven't engaged in certain benefits?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, obviously, from a just sort of an operational perspective, but also from an experience perspective. I think that, in many ways, let's kind of call it what it is in some ways. Some of these supplemental benefits were really, in some ways, marketing, right? It was about gaining as many members as you could, and sure, there's the altruistic side for these supplemental benefits helping members, but sometimes plans made it a little difficult to access at times, and I think CMS got smart and I think it's well overdue. And giving members more access to the benefits that they've earned and that they deserve is a good thing. And in some ways, you could think about this as a positive, right? I mean, if we have actuary or finance friends on the call, maybe you may not think of it like that from a utilization perspective, but doing the right things by your members and telling them you have access to something that you're not utilizing. Actually, I'll give a sidebar example here quickly. I have really bad internet at my house, as Melissa and Rebecca will attest to. And I was on the phone with a large internet provider, people can guess, and I realized that they had a package of internet that was 10 times faster for me at the same price that I'm paying now, that I wouldn't have known if I didn't go onto the website. And think about it from a customer experience perspective. If this large internet provider would have called me and said, "Hey, we have an offer, you could be paying the same thing and getting better service," I would have such brand loyalty to them. But the reality is they didn't. I was on the call for an hour. I got through it. I'm getting better internet at a higher price. But think about that from the health plan lens, right? You have access to grocery cards, you have access to transportation, OTC benefits. Imagine if a health plan calls a member prospectively, before the requirement said, "Hey, Rebecca, you have access to this $100 a month grocery card that you're not utilizing. Why don't you take advantage of it and save a couple dollars," right? Melissa did a great job talking about equity in this program. And when we talk about equity, we're talking about people that may not have access to all of the care that they need, or access to good food, or access to transportation. Imagine how the health plan could have helped facilitate a positive interaction. I think this is a tremendous opportunity for health plans, candidly.
Okay, Rebecca, we've got the next one for you. So can we talk about cut points? I told you, I think cut points are a four-letter word. I think about them as a four-letter word every time I see them. But I know you've dealt a lot in the last couple of weeks with cut points, particularly on changing measures like colorectal cancer screening. We know eye exam is going to be the same way. Maybe you could talk a little bit about sort of how this cut point volatility is going to play in during the years of change where we've got colo, like for example, colo and EED flipping measurement methodologies.
Yeah, I think plans aren't alone in feeling pressure as to where should the cut points be, where should they look at. I think you really have to be in the data. I think my advice to you would be get with your data team, make sure that you're looking at numerator, denominators, performance trends year over year, same time last year, current performance year to date, and scenario model it. I think Melissa and I probably joke that we've spent a significant amount of hours over the last few months scenario modeling for different clients of ours, asking us that exact same question. Where do you think we're going to end up? And I think that utilize your historical performance and what you know to date moving forward within the trends that you're seeing in your data, and develop different scenarios of what you think you're going to see in the data. There's no one size fits all with what it's going to look like with cut points, but we can certainly use historical data as a barrier and something that can impact some of the trends that we can see in the future.
Yep. Okay. So Andrew, I'm gonna answer two questions and ask you a third one as we go.
Okay.
So Amy, I see your question about SNSE. Is SNSE, the social needs screening ECDS HEDIS measure, on hold? There was a lot of talk and it seemed to disappear. To Amy's question, yes, that measure is totally on hold. It's not being added. It was a brand new ECDS measure to deal with Andrew's comment that wouldn't it be great if your health plan that pays your healthcare bills always called you and asked an HRA set of questions so that they could best help you. There was so much pushback from plans top to bottom on whether they could do that and do it in the way Andrew described in his ECDS conversion slide. That one popped off. It's a good lesson, really good lesson that it's a really good lesson that CMS puts a lot of proposals out for public comment, and they mean public comment. So talking about public commentary and the importance of commentating back to CMS, Andrew, I'm going to port Brendan's question in here about the possible transition of TRC to ECDS as a question. So given that you just talked about sort of your passion project right now, which is helping plans and providers through the ECDS conversion, what would you encourage them to submit back to CMS as far as feedback as they're thinking about moving TRC to ECDS? They backed off on SNSE because of the challenges. How do you think about that? How do you formulate feedback?
So I like the question, but I almost have to go back to what hat am I wearing? Am I wearing a health plan hat? Am I being a consultant hat? Right? Because I think from a health plan perspective, sure, it's going to be a tough challenge, right? Plans are going to have to invest a lot of time, money, energy into a a project that's not going to get done in a year. It's going to take an evolution to move into digital quality measurement, to really get good, strong data governance. And so if I'm a health plan, I'm thinking, let's just delay this. Give us a date, right? Draw a line in the sand and just be candid with your expectation of us. If I'm a health plan, that's what I'm thinking. Now, if I'm sort of advocate, kind of being hard on health plans, I'm going to say, too bad, like figure it out. You guys have done very well for a very long time. Going back to sort of the Change Healthcare cyber attack, I was candidly a little surprised that CMS gave the extension for some of those plans impacted. But to the question you're saying, my other side of my brain would say, kind of too bad. You guys should be investing in infrastructure. It's not like this is a surprise. Maybe the measure level, measures could be, hey, that popped in, I wasn't expecting that one, but it's not like this is, it's not like this has never been discussed, or it's not like NCQA and other, accrediting bodies haven't been talking about this for a while. So on one hand, I say kind of too bad, so sad.
You're tough-nosed. Okay, Rebecca, I've got the last question for you, and then I'm going to ask each of us to wrap up with closing thoughts since we're at an hour and 45. So Rebecca, let's ask you the next question. It's about the change of colorectal cancer screening to ECDS this year, and whether you expect or anticipate that being in the improvement measure this year or out of the improvement measure this year as the measurement methodology changes. What's your guess? And Andrew, I'm going to ask you that one before I ask you your closing comments.
My gut reaction is it will not be included in it because of the measure specification changes, and I'd be interested to hear your opinions as well.
Yeah,
Good.
my gut says same, right? It's a material
Okay.
measure change and it won't be counted. But candidly, I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
I don't know that any of us know the answer. For the record, this is why we love to get together with all of our friends at conferences and why we're doing the Haas Hackathon on December 2nd, is because it takes a village to answer these questions. I actually, Katie, think that there's a fair chance that it might be in the improvement measure because CMS is rolling in the change to ECDS as a non-substantive measure change. To me, it feels like a substantive measure change. I don't even know how they've come up with a conclusion that it's non-substantive, but they did deem it non-substantive, so it rolled in without having to go to display. So I think it'll be in. But I think back to the question that Andrew, or the question that I asked you, Andrew, this would be a great piece of feedback on the next proposed rule. The next proposed rule for 2026 Medicare Advantage changes is at OMB. I keep waking up every day to see if it's been released. Katie, this is a really good one. If you want it out, this would be a great piece of feedback to get to CMS and request it be out, because they will read every piece of feedback that you submit. They don't do what we ask all the time, but propose what you'd like. Every change we have in Medicare Advantage star ratings is because all of you collectively provided feedback to CMS in these proposed rules. And I think that's a great way to end our session from the Q&A standpoint. I know we've got some other ones. We'll get you guys answers after the session. Rebecca, why don't we take a spin through the three of us? Quick closing thoughts. We've got 75 people left. Quick closing thoughts. Anything important that we've left unsaid that you'd leave our friends with before we sign off for the day?
I think my closing comment to everybody is you're not alone. There's many of you on this call that probably feel like you are facing a headwind that is extremely difficult and you cannot get through. Just know that you are not alone. We feel that every single day with you all. And if you ever need to talk about anything, we're certainly here to brainstorm and solve the challenges with you.
And be their therapist. Sometimes the best role we play is that of a therapist for a day or a minute.
Absolutely.
Andrew, how about you? Love that.
Yeah,
That's brilliant, Rebecca. Thank you.
Melissa, as I reflect a little bit, our at Prospire, we have rules for how we work together, and one of them is really being comfortable being uncomfortable. And as I sit and kind of listen to our conversation and think about all the conversations we've had over the last year plus about these massive changes that are happening, I'm encouraged. I'm excited. I'm energized. I think that, to your earlier comment about innovation, I think now's really the time for the cream to rise to the top, so to say, and that there's going to be a lot of innovation in the short term and in the long term. I'm excited to help plans think creatively and innovatively. I'm interested to see what others are going to do. And I'll again shout out sort of my obsession, passion project of this digital quality measurement transformation, ECDS. I just think there's such a pivotal opportunity for plans, and not many folks are really investing into what that means and what it's going to take. So those are some of my thoughts.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to wrap up with my thoughts. So, you know, we're all sitting in here in our home offices. It's not lost on me that this is the third professional job I've had in this same home office. Different teams, different phases of Medicare Advantage maturity and Star Ratings maturity. The one thing that has been consistent through my decade in this particular home office has been the value of a team and finding people who are good teammates and willing to solve problems together. It's kind of why we landed on this particular quote to end our session with. I find it's really good for those of us who find ourselves too isolated in our home offices to remember we all have to find our teams. That's why us, the Newton Smith Group and Prospire come together, is we're living and breathing teamwork every day, being the best both of us have. I feel like that's maybe the most important lesson that I would say is we need to find our teams, value our teams, and embrace the teamwork, because this is a team sport, not an individual sport. With that in mind, all of us are individuals. I'm going to leave you guys with a parting comment. I think our most precious asset right now is time. Most of you, when we call you, you tell us that it's money that's the most precious asset, but time is it. So spending our time where it matters. I know that's what we're trying to do. And I hope in the next few months, we'll get to spend our time face to face with you all, because that's where it matters in the next few months for us. So thank you. For those of you guys who stuck around with us, we'll get you the slides, we'll get you the recording, happy to share it around. And if we can be of assistance, we're only a phone call or a text away, and we hope to see all of you very, very soon. Thanks, friends. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.